What's up, Taiwan? I'm signing to you with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. U.S. President Donald Trump is getting ready to slap more tariffs on goods entering the U.S. And this time, chips are on the list, along with automobiles and pharmaceuticals. Joyce Dung has been following Trump's announcements and joins us from our newsroom in Taipei. Joyce, what do we know?
Hey, Sandy. Yeah, we're hearing more about these tariffs that Trump has pledged to impose since taking office. Specifically, he's looking to slap on 25% tariffs on cars, which could come as soon as April. He's also waging a similar 25% or higher rate on pharmaceuticals and chips. Now, here in Taiwan, a lot of attention has been on his plans for chips. Taiwan's most valuable company, TSMC, is the unmatched leader in making this critical technology, which is also seen as a crucial part of Taiwan's defense. Now, speaking to economists in Taiwan and in the U.S., they tell me that these tariff threats put Taiwan in a dangerous position. Its largest industry is under threat. Now, Trump has repeatedly accused Taiwan of stealing the U.S.'s chips business. Taipei has responded by even sending officials to Washington to clarify with the Trump team that this is not true. Now, Trump has said that because of his tariffs, he's already getting major industry players, including in chips, to move to the U.S.
I've been contacted by some of the biggest companies in the world. And because of what we're doing economically and through tariffs and taxes and incentives, they want to come back into the United States. And we'll be announcing various very large companies, the biggest actually, and they'll be coming back, having to do with chips and having to do also with cars and lots of other things.
TaiwanPlus reached out to TSMC to confirm whether they've talked to Trump's team, and they say they have no comment. But look, the idea of bringing chips manufacturing to the U.S. is not new. We saw this with Joe Biden and the CHIPS Act subsidies, which helped with TSMC's multi-billion-dollar investment in Arizona to build 3 factories there. For Trump, the logic can be seen as the same, but instead of, say, using carrots as incentives, he's using sticks. Sandy?
So, Joyce, we've just heard Trump there talking about companies coming back to the U.S. Do we know what exactly that could look like for chips?
Well, there's been speculation that TSMC and Broadcom, a U.S. chip firm, are each considering acquiring a stake in Intel. The iconic American chipmaker has been struggling for years now to keep up with competition. But amid these rumors of a potential takeover, Intel's shares were up 16% for its best day in the stock market since early 2020. Again, this is all based still on speculation, but there are fears in Taiwan about whether TSMC's involvement would include a technology transfer. The worry, of course, is that the firm would have to share its trade secrets and potentially lose its leadership in these most critical advanced chips.
Thank you, Joyce. That was Joyce Lin live from our newsroom. There's been a surge in U.S. and Chinese military activity near Taiwan. Rick Loward is tracking developments for us. Rick, dozens of incursions are being reported. What do we know?
So, as you said, an unusually large amount of military activity around the country. Here's what we know so far. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported that 36 Chinese military planes and 7 Chinese Navy vessels were operating around Taiwan in the 24 hours before 6 a.m. on Wednesday. Out of this, 13 Chinese planes were operating in an area southwest of Taiwan. This is the same location that a number of US military planes were flying at around the same time. But what's interesting, in an unusual move, the Ministry of National Defense released a second statement just over an hour ago to say that between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. on Wednesday, another 20 Chinese military planes were operating around Taiwan. The Ministry of National Defense calling this a joint combat readiness patrol by China and saying that Taiwan launched its own boats and planes in response. Now, Beijing doesn't tell us why it's doing certain drills when. We're left to infer what China means by its military maneuvers like this. It could be that China saw that there were US planes operating in an area that it says is part of its sovereign territory and therefore launched its own sorties in response. And China has also been known to do what are called so-called punishment drills, that is, showing its distaste for Taiwan and its allies' actions done by them. And we do know that this week there has been some more details emerged of a big US weapons purchase by Taiwan, weapons, of course, that Taiwan uses to counter those territorial claims by China.
That was Rick Lauert reporting on a surge in Chinese military activity around Taiwan. China's military is defending a dangerous maneuver one of its aircraft made near a Philippine plane over the hotly disputed South China Sea. Journalists on board the Philippines aircraft recorded a Chinese military helicopter coming within 3 meters of the plane near the disputed Scarborough Shoal of the northwestern Philippines. The Philippines Coast Guard has described the maneuver as a reckless action and says it posed a serious risk to the safety of the pilots. China, which claims almost all of the South China Sea as its territory, says the Philippines aircraft illegally intruded into its airspace. The United States and Russia have agreed to hold further talks on ending the war in Ukraine after the country's top diplomats met in Saudi Arabia. With Ukraine and Europe excluded from the meeting, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is adamant he won't accept a deal made without Kyiv's involvement. Rosie Greninger reports.
Face-to-face, top diplomats from the US and Russia talked Ukraine as they met in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. It's the first direct negotiations between Washington and Moscow since Vladimir Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine almost 3 years ago.
I came away today convinced that they are willing to begin to engage in a serious process to determine how and how quickly and through what mechanism can an end be brought to this war. Whether we can ultimately reach that outcome will obviously depend on every side in this conflict's willingness to agree to certain things.
But Ukraine was left out of the almost 5-hour meeting, where Russia made a series of demands to do with territory, also insisting it would not accept Ukraine being admitted to the NATO military alliance. Since its full-scale invasion, Russia now occupies about 20% of Ukraine's north and east. The US reiterated that concessions of Ukrainian territory may need to be made to find a permanent end to the war, and that they're pushing for security guarantees to ensure the conflict cannot reignite.
Можете обговорювати що завгодно, але не можна приймати рішення без України, як завершити війну в Україні. Ті чи інші умови. І нас не запрошували на цю зустріч, російсько-американську зустріч в Саудівській Аравії. Для нас це було сюрпризом, я думаю, так, як і для багатьох.
Also left out of the discussion, Ukraine's European neighbours, who are now considering boosting their spending to help the country's defence. US negotiators say they're in contact with European officials and insist no one is being sidelined, least of all Ukraine. Their concerns dismissed by US President Donald Trump.
I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their side.
After an emergency summit with European leaders, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer suggested sending British peacekeepers to Kyiv when a deal is struck, a move that the US president said he was open to, but Moscow quickly ruled that out.
И поэтому объяснили мы сегодня появление войск, вооруженных сил из тех же стран НАТО, но под чужим флагом, под флагом Евросоюза или под национальными флагами, ничего в этом плане не меняет. Это нам, конечно же, неприемлемо.
As diplomatic efforts to end the conflict ramp up, the peace talks get support from another global power.
我们乐见一切致力于和平的努力，包括美俄达成的和谈共识。
As Moscow and Washington forge ahead with negotiations, Trump confirmed he would probably meet Putin before the end of this month. And Europe is also rallying, planning to hold another summit on Ukraine and the continent's security, this time inviting NATO ally Canada, as it continues to push for all Western allies to work together to find a lasting end to the conflict. Eason Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Hundreds of people in the Cook Islands have protested a deal between their government and China. The agreement covers controversial deep-sea mining and other economic partnerships and also emphasizes diplomatic ties, a point of contention, as protesters accuse the Prime Minister of threatening relations with New Zealand.
And I would say that the actions of our Prime Minister in the last 3 weeks has been someone of a person who thinks he owns our country as his own business. He's wheeling and dealing and making deals around the world that's affecting us, the people of the country, and we've got no idea.
Opposition parties will hold a no-confidence vote against Prime Minister Mark Brown's government next week. A young boy has died in a fire at a temple in southern Taiwan. The boy was one of 4 people trapped in the temple when it caught fire Tuesday night. Firefighters rescued his great-grandparents and another young boy, all hospitalized for smoke inhalation. The second boy was later found under an altar table without vital signs. Authorities are investigating the cause of the blaze and say a large quantity of flammable joss paper stored in the temple may have contributed to its rapid spread. At least 21 people died from flu complications in Taiwan last week, including a preschool-aged girl. Taiwan Centers for Disease Control says the total death toll for this flu season has reached 181. The CDC says 148,000 people sought medical treatment for flu last week, the second highest for this period in the past decade. Health officials say flu cases are still in the epidemic phase, with the outbreak expected to ease by mid to late March. An additional 100,000 government-funded flu vaccines have been distributed, with priority given to high-risk groups. Thanks for watching What's Up Taiwan. Finally, we take you to Cologne, Germany, to join the festivities with the Carnival Triumvirate. I'm Sandy Chi. Take care and see you next time.